At 8 in the evening, you finally finish a long day at work and return home. Exhausted, you simply can't muster the energy to cook, so you pick up your phone and skillfully open a certain red or orange app. As your finger mechanically scrolls upward, images of delicious food flash across the screen like a carousel. Half an hour passes, and though your stomach is growling with hunger, you still can't make up your mind. In the end, you probably just randomly order the same pork knuckle you had yesterday. Why is it that we always have such a hard time deciding what to order for delivery? Hello everyone, welcome to today's A1 Lab. Today, I'd like to talk to you about how your genes influence your food preferences. In 2022, a large-scale genetic study published in Nature Communications analyzed the eating preferences of over 160,000 people and found that human food preferences are not just a chaotic mess, but are actually influenced by a sophisticated genetic framework. The study summarized our food preferences into a multi-layered model, with 3 genetically independent main dimensions at the top. One is the high-reward group, driven by foods like sugary, fatty, and salty items that provide strong, immediate pleasure. Another is the low-energy group, dominated by preferences for healthy, low-energy density foods, such as vegetables and fruits. The third is the acquired taste group, which includes foods like unsweetened coffee and cheese, whose unique flavors require learned appreciation. Interestingly, the high-reward group is almost genetically independent from the other two. This means that your craving for fried chicken and French fries and your appreciation for black coffee are actually controlled by 2 completely different and independent dietary decision-making systems in your brain. You can simply think of it as one system being influenced by primitive biological instincts, the instinctive brain that seeks immediate energy rewards, while the other is the rational brain, which, based on acquired experience, can make choices for health or social needs. So is it the primitive tribe or modern civilization that dominates your food choices? In fact, the answer lies hidden within our genetically designed brains. Researchers compared the genetic traits of food preferences with MRI-based brain structure genetic data and found that people who are more easily obsessed with high sugar, high-fat foods tend to have a smaller volume in the striatum of the basal ganglia in their brains. The striatum generates pleasure under dopamine stimulation. It processes reward signals, regulates motivational behavior, and influences addictive behaviors. And if its volume is relatively small, it may affect the synthesis and release of dopamine, making it necessary to consume more highly rewarding foods to feel satisfied. This makes you innately more susceptible to cravings for junk comfort foods like fried chicken. In other words, some people's instinctive brains are naturally more easily ignited by delicious food, while preferences for low-calorie foods, and those acquired later in life, are related to the development of the cerebral cortex, which is responsible for self-control, decision-making, and sensory integration. It's just like that line from Eason's song, Bitter Melon. I really can't figure out why we used to hate eating bitter melon. We were so smart, able to tell which types of melons tasted more bitter. We do instinctively dislike foods that are less tasty, but this instinct is not insurmountable. Liking these foods simply requires more advanced cognitive processing, involving sensory discrimination, cultural understanding, and rational decision-making. Therefore, those who consistently choose healthy foods and can appreciate complex flavors often have a natural advantage when it comes to self-discipline. Researchers speculate that there may be profound evolutionary logic behind this. For example, in ancient times when food was scarce, high-calorie foods were essential for survival, and any genetic mutations that reduced the preference for such foods would have been ruthlessly eliminated by natural selection. In contrast, genes that increase tolerance for bitter or uniquely flavored foods could broaden the diet and improve human survival chances in changing environments. However, the menu for our human ancestors was actually very simple. Their brains only needed to process a very limited number of choices, such as whether the fruit they found was edible or how many days the hunted prey could last them. But today, when you open a food delivery app, you are faced with a culinary universe built by algorithms, one that is almost infinitely expanding. The well-known management scholar Sheena Iyengar discovered that when the number of jam varieties on display was reduced from 24 to 6, the purchase rate among customers actually increased tenfold. This phenomenon is known as the paradox of choice. Having too many options not only fails to make us freer, but actually triggers anxiety, lowers our satisfaction, and makes us more likely to regret our decisions afterward. And today's food delivery platforms almost perfectly trigger this paradox. The nearly infinite scrolling design always suggests that the next option might be better. You have to weigh every criterion, speed, rating, price, over and over again. Not to mention the countless discounts, order combinations, and delivery times you also need to consider. Yet, our decision-making ability is actually a limited cognitive resource. After a whole day of work, having made countless big and small decisions, your decision-making energy is nearly depleted. Neuroscientific research shows that when you're tired, activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for higher cognitive functions, decreases, while the amygdala, which processes emotions and instincts, becomes relatively more active. This means that at this moment, when you're ordering takeout, you're essentially making decisions with a childlike brain. As a result, you're more likely to be driven by primal appetites and lack the willpower to choose the healthier but slightly less appealing option. What's even more concerning is that, although you do have the right to choose your takeout, most of the options you see are actually a cocoon designed by the platform's recommendation algorithms. Once it detects that you lack resistance to highly rewarding foods, it will keep pushing you popular high-sugar, high-fat dishes, making you constantly torn between wanting to give in to your instinctive brain and order fried chicken or barbecue, and your rational brain warning you about anxieties like obesity and other health issues. So every time you get home from work and open a food delivery app, the tug-of-war between your instinctive brain and your rational brain consumes a huge amount of your mental resources. It's like an old computer with dozens of browser tabs open at once, eventually freezing from overload and leaving you stuck in indecision. So is there any way to avoid this kind of difficulty? Yes, my friend, there is. Now that we understand the root cause of our indecisiveness, we can naturally find ways to address it. You can take a page from Tim's habit of wearing similar clothes and set some simple rules for yourself. For example, I usually use the dietary preference gene analysis section on WeGene to filter out my personally preferred high-reward foods and healthy foods. On one hand, this turns the open-ended question of what to eat every day into a multiple-choice question, helping me avoid the daily battle of cognitive exhaustion. On the other hand, I can also plan indulgent meals in advance, choosing high-calorie foods that suit my taste to satisfy my instincts. In modern society, the question of what to eat tonight has evolved into a prolonged battle of cognitive exhaustion. Fortunately, you have now seen through the underlying rules of this game, transforming from a passive victim of indecision into an active architect of your own choices. See you next time.